Hi, after making a few videos about atheism, I thought I'd make one about politics. And what I like to say here is that basically I'm somebody who's on the left in politics. Um, I'm not a Marxist. I wouldn't call myself a socialist either. Maybe a social democrat is about the closest label you could get to my beliefs. So in this video I'd like to say why I think the left is right, and I'll just explain what I mean by this. Um, now, what I mean is that the left has a more convincing story to tell about the way that people actually are, rather than some idealisation of people. I think that the right, the kind of ideology that we have on the right of politics, is based on a myth. We'll call it the myth of the rational individual. This is the idea that every individual is perfectly equipped to make rational choices, and if they make the wrong choice, that's purely a question of their irresponsibility. Now, I think what the right kind of conveniently forgets here is that in cases where people do act responsibly and make the right choices, usually that's because they've benefited from a whole community that backs them, or it can be their family or their education. They've had a certain amount of privileges which enable them to be in that position of making responsible choices. So a responsible chooser is not doesn't exist automatically. There's a whole series of conditions that causes that. Typical kind of model of for the right is the entrepreneur, the businessman, who's seen as this rational individual who goes out, who makes choices, changes things, and so on. But what the right usually forgets is that this person has benefited from probably a certain family background, loving parents. They've benefited from good education. The state spent a lot of money on their education. They've also perhaps this supposedly independent individual businessman. Well, he has a secretary to type his letters for him. He has a whole team working for him sometimes, and perhaps he has family, his wife cooking for him, and so on. So the idea that there's just a rational individual, that we're all rational individuals, and then that if we choose badly, that's just irresponsibility, and if we choose well, then it shows what great responsible individuals we are. I think it's, to use an American term, I think it's a load of baloney. So my approach to politics then is says rather that there are some people who start off with advantages, and generally they continue to have these advantages that enable them to become rational. I'm not saying everybody who doesn't have these advantages is irrational, but I'm just saying that you certainly help somebody to be rational by giving them. You help somebody to be responsible and not to kind of make mistakes in their professional or private life by giving them a lot of support from the community. And I think even the people who think of themselves as being kind of most independent, autonomous, rational, and so on, they're as vulnerable as anybody else when it comes down to it. And so they'll tend to promote politics which is on the right, saying, hey, all these lazy, lay-arounds and people who sponging off welfare and so on, but they conveniently forget that these people have not had all the advantages that they've had. So what I would say that politics exists for then is to, well, to start with, to compensate to some extent for the natural and social disadvantages that some people have. Try and bring things up to towards equality. You'll never achieve total equality, but what you can do is to try to at least even things out a little bit so people have the same kinds of chances in life. And I think that's what the left's about for me. The left isn't about necessarily the state having complete control of the economy, state owning businesses and so on. The state is about, or politics for me is about making sure that everybody has a good start, and then if people go through rough times, then they also need help occasionally. Okay, that doesn't mean de-responsibilizing everybody. That just means that there are times there are people in situations who will need help from the beginning because they haven't got it in their family. So you need a very strong education system, and also everybody can get sick. You know, we might all need help later on. So these things, I don't think these things that should be left to chance. I think education is can change your life so much. It determines what kind of job you get. It determines how your life goes, basically. And health, it's the same. Health can ruin your life, and I don't think these two things should be left to chance or to the fact that you just happen to be lucky to be born into this family or that family. So so there has to be a state intervening and evening things out a little bit. As I said, I'm not a Marxist. I'm not for the idea of total equality. I don't think it's workable, and then you start to get into, you know, a very unwieldy bureaucratic state, and you start also taking away any incentive for people to improve and to better their lives, which is an element you need. And I'd like to add to this, just to, before I finish, the ecological element, because I didn't say this at the beginning, because I suppose it's not automatically something that's seen as part of the left's agenda. But I think whether you're on the left or right, I think unless you really have your head in the sand these days, you have to take on the ecological agenda. And I think this is something that is very, very difficult for people to take on board, because I think it's going to mean really changing our lifestyles, and I don't think I think very many people are not ready for this, and certainly the politicians are not ready for it. It requires a vast rethink, and a rethink also of consumerism, because that's the other element. Our society is built on consumerism, the idea that happiness comes from consuming more goods, and I can refer you to some of the videos that Anti-Consumer puts up, which are very interesting. But I think it's just such a simple way of looking at human fulfillment and happiness. So I don't. People say, well, if people want to get rich, you know, that's they should be free to do that. Perhaps, but I think the idea of the whole society being built on the idea that richness, material wealth makes you happier, is I think we're going in the wrong direction, and we have been for a long time. So perhaps it's such a bad thing that the planet is coming along to remind us that we have to look after it, and this also brings us back to thinking about what actually makes us happy in the end. And I don't think it's the way we've been living in the last decades. That's all I have to say.